Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 30. I'm your host Dan Matson, and this is the world's very first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, and tradition of wooden boats. Thanks for joining me today, folks. Great to have you. It's been a good week in the wooden boat world again. Actually, every week's a good week. We love to share the love about wooden boats and traditional boats on this show, and that's what my purpose is. So glad you're enjoying it and you're with us again. Maybe this is your first time, actually. We'll see. Anyway, today's featured segment is an interview I did with Gruye. Christian is a lady that has owned and now is the head steward of a 1909 wooden vessel called the MV Lotus. It's a 92-foot Edwardian vessel, Edwardian-style vessel. And stick around for the interview. It's a lot of fun. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Well, this week, it is Thursday right now. I'm recording this on the day of the podcast publication. And I've been invited to attend the quarterly meeting of the Pacific Northwest Maritime Heritage Council. That's a mouthful. Wow. Anyway, it's a group of about 100 organizations in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and British Columbia that meet about 2 or 3 times a year to talk about furthering the cause of preserving maritime history. And I know some people on the council, Les Bolton from the Grays Harbor Historical Society. I know some people there from the Center for Wooden Boats in Seattle, and Jake Beatty from the Northwest Maritime Center. And I believe Deborah and Marty from Three Sheets Northwest are involved also. So apparently they have about 30 to 40 folks at each of the quarterly meetings. This will be my first meeting, so I'm really looking forward to it. It's down in Portland. So my wife and I are going to leave Arlington, Washington early Saturday morning, head down there, and I'll attend the meeting from 10 to 4, and then we'll get to take a tour of a stern wheel vessel there in Portland, a historic maritime museum right on the Willamette River in Portland. So I'm really looking forward to that. It should be a lot of fun. As far as me personally, I've been working on my canoe a little bit, not a ton, but I have cut all the rabbets in the half panels for my canoe. I did that before I scarfed them together. I decided it'd be easier to rabbet the 8-foot half panels rather than or 6-foot half panels rather than the full-length 12-foot panels. And I ended up using, I had built a rabbet plane myself, and I shared pictures of that on my website, hookedonwoodenboats.com, last week with episode 29, but it just didn't work. I was so proud of myself, too, for making it. I thought it would be really cool, but it just wasn't working, so I just thought, well, I'm going to bite the bullet. And I went down and bought a $17 rabbet bit at the hardware store, got my router out, and routed the rabbet joints in all the panels, and that was really quick and easy. And so maybe I'll buy a real rabbet plane one of these days. But anyway, I got the rabbets cut, so my next step is to scarf the panels together. My goal is to get this rig done by Memorial Day weekend, because we're going to go on a little outing with some friends at a lake house, and it sure be nice to try out the old 12-foot sassafras canoe on the lake for the first time. So we'll see. That's my goal. And it's good to have goals and to make small incremental steps. In fact, I was just listening to a podcast by Michael Hyatt It's called This Is Your Life. And the guy is really inspirational with leadership ideas and motivational ideas and how to get stuff done and how to be productive, and just a real positive, upbeat guy. So if you get a chance, listen to Michael's podcast also. Well, I really like it when you connect with me. You can email me at dan@hookedonwoodenboats. You can go to my website, hookedonwoodenboats.com, and leave comments there that I respond to. And you can also connect with me on Twitter, Pinterest, and Facebook. If you look for Wooden Boat Dan, you'll find me there. I'm having the most fun, I think, with Pinterest. I've got some bulletin boards up there with some upcoming wooden boat events, boat shows, cool pictures, wooden boat places that I personally like. So if you haven't gotten on Pinterest.com yet, go for it. It's really fun. Let's see, what else here? I think that's about it for introductory news items this week. I hope you're having a good week and getting out on the water in your boat. Again, please send me an email and tell me what you're up to in the wooden boat world. I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, I wanted to give you a little background on the interview. On February 22nd, the MV Lotus was at anchor. It was actually tied to a mooring buoy that was anchored in Port Hadlock. There was a windstorm and the chain failed between the bottom anchor and the mooring buoy itself, and the MV Lotus blew free and ran aground, or blew aground, and Christian got a call in the middle of the night or early evening that the boat was aground in Port Hadlock, so they went over there and did a big rescue on the boat, got it off, and so they hauled it over and put it in dry dock in Port Townsend at the Haven Boatyard. And so that's where the boat was when I met Christian. So I got to go on the boat in dry dock and look at the repairs they were doing and interview Christian. And let's go ahead and start the interview with that introduction. Take it away, Christian. So it is March 20th, 2012, and I am sitting on the MV Lotus with Christian. Christian, you told me how to say your last name, and I already forgot. Gruye? Gruye. Okay. Christian Gruye. Mm-hmm. And so welcome to the show, Christian.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you today. We've just done a little tour of the MV Lotus, and I'm assuming MV stands for motor vessel.
Exactly.
Yep. So this boat was built in 1909, I believe, and Christian has a long history with it. So, but before we start that, tell me a little bit about yourself, Christian. Where did you grow up, and did your family do boating when you were young, and those kind of things?
My father was an Air Force pilot, so we lived everywhere for 2 or 3 years.
Around the U.S.?
All around the U.S. and in Germany twice, and in Spain.
Wow.
That was pretty fun,
yeah.
Those trips. And but we spent a majority of our time up here in these islands and in Seattle. That's my mom and dad's home port. So there's lots of family and cousins, and it's what brought me back to Port Townsend as an older adult. I came home.
Okay, yeah. So you kind of grew up all over the place, but you did spend some time in Seattle.
Oh, a
Seattle
lot.
area, a lot of time here. Yeah.
We come for summers.
Yeah. Okay. So prior to your family purchasing the Lotus, did they do a lot of boating before that with wooden boats? And
canoes.
Things? With canoes?
Uh-huh.
Really? Tell me about that.
Well, we have one in our shop, actually. It's a Willits Canoe. That was my father's.
Yeah.
And that was our family boat.
Oh.
We borrowed ski boats. We didn't own a ski boat, but my dad was a tremendous water skier. Pacific Northwest champion for 7 years.
Wow.
And he's one of the guys who brought back all those Cypress Gardens kind of water ski stunts and tricks.
Really?
Yeah, because he went on a tour of duty to Florida, and he saw that gig happening there.
Right.
And when he came home, he told all of his sports buddies, I saw this thing. And they make these skis out of slabs of wood with a steam box and a wooden skeg. And they screwed and glued a tennis shoe to an oval of wood, and then wing netted that onto the ski that they made. The skis were like 8 or 10 inches across.
Yeah.
And with a little tip that they steamed up so that it would go through the water better. And that was their ski shoe. And they would just lace their tennis shoe on and hop on behind a boat. And they made it up. They really did. And that was the Lake Washington Water Ski Club. And out of that came Don Ibsen, who is a very famous line of water skis now. And my dad was part of that. Anyway,
really?
So our family water skied. That was our thing to do. And but we never owned a water ski boat. There were plenty of them.
But you guys did have a canoe.
Yeah.
And that was a cedar canoe, was it? Or
Cedar, double-planked canoe made on Day Island. They're kind of famous boats now.
So you grew up on the water.
I did.
Yeah. So then, did your family go from a canoe to what's the length of this boat?
92-foot
92-foot boat?
Exactly.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Okay. So tell me what happened.
I was about 11, and my family was in Seattle again for the summer, and my dad was still flying planes up in Oregon at the time. He was commander down at Kingsley Field in Oregon, Klamath Falls. But up here, my mom had a notion that she wanted to get a ferry boat and redo it so that they could have a project for when they retired and a big place for us to be on the water. And the ferry sounded wonderful. And in those days, there were lots of ferries being mothballed. And there were lots of great old boats, and there was great old waterfront. You know, not so cleaned up as it is today. But more fun, more interesting. And so she was on the lookout for it, and she found Lotus. And Lotus was on Lake Union, down at the north end at the Murphy Francis Marina, which is now where the water police of Seattle berthed their boats. And it's where Gasworks Park is, right next to it. And Lotus was there at that Murphy Francis Marina, leaning up against the pilings, not doing very well in the hull. Her house was okay. Her house was fine inside. But the outside was pretty tough. Her stern was compost, really compost. But they bought her for $5,000.
$5,000. And what year was this?
In 59.
1959. Okay.
Maybe they found her in 59. They might have finalized it in 60. I remember the paper saying. But anyway, I was going to tell you, she was built in 09 for $5,000.
Oh, you're kidding.
That's the difference in money.
Oh, my goodness.
60, 50 years would make. That amazing?
Yeah.
So they bought her for $5,000, and they had to tow her everywhere because she didn't have an engine. That was just where you saw in the galley. That was just all had floorboards, hatches all over that. What is now an engine bay. They'd put hatches all over it so you could walk on it.
So the engine had been taken out.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
And during the war, for the war effort, probably the first war. Maybe the second war. Must have been the second war. When it finally went away because they were still motoring around in the 30s. So, but in that order of the way things went, there was the McMickens built the boat.
They had the boat built? Or
they had the boat built.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a better way of saying it. Yeah. They had the boat built.
Yeah.
They were pretty wealthy. But wealthy in that day didn't mean that they lived in a McMansion exactly, or they had plenty of money to do what they wanted to do, but what they wanted to do was be on the water. They already had a 40-foot sailboat that they sailed up the Inside Passage all the time. And they fabulous photographs of their family out picnicking and hiking, and they were very earthy folks, and they really enjoyed being out in the Pacific Northwest. This was their home. Long time, generationally, they'd been here a long time. And so after Micken passed away, his son inherited it. They sold it. It was a very short list. I think there's 4 owners before my dad, including original McMicken, his son, a fellow who only owned it for 3 days, and he died in a motorcycle accident. And the McMicken family got it back again. Then they sold it to a family up in Coopville. The name I can't recall right now. It's Oslings. And they sold it to my mom and dad.
Okay.
So my dad was the fifth owner, Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
It was my mom's idea, I really should say.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so they bought it in 1960. It needed a lot of work. So what
did a lot of
do?
work.
What did
Up
they
in
do?
Everett, we'd had her towed up there.
You had her towed to Everett.
And put up on the ways, they would pull her up on a railway car and then slide them sideways on timbers so big as waist high on a man.
Wow.
And then slide them sideways on creosote so they would slide and stack them up there depending on how long they thought they were going to be in the yard.
Really?
You know, you could bury a boat back there if they thought it was going to be there for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had shipwrights work on her, and we got to work on her too a little bit. It became tighter over the years. The union made it more difficult for us to work personally on our own boat, but we did, and at least we were support. I cooked a lot of food.
Yeah.
You know.
How many kids are in the family? 3. 3? Okay. So you all worked on the boat?
We did.
How long did it take to get it fixed and back
Oh, I
in the
don't
water?
even remember. You know, I was a kid in those days. Time was, days were sweet. You know, there was lots of play all around the waterfront and berries to pick and new friends to meet. And it was a very nice life. And but I have used that expression that we learned to work on Lotus. That ethic, that work day, feeling of satisfaction at the end of the day, and you sit down to a nice meal, and you know you've really earned your room and board.
Yeah, feel productive.
We did feel very productive. We felt much like very like a crew.
Yeah,
it was very good for our family. It was really good.
Yeah. So then, so what happened after that? Then the ensuing years with the Lotus, and what did you guys do with the boat after you got her in the water? What did the family do?
Actually, she was treated more like a houseboat than anything because we still didn't have an engine. We could only tow her around.
Oh, really?
But we kept changing moorages for whatever reasons. I don't even know. Really? We were on Lake Union, Lake Washington, Everett, Olympia, up in the islands, Camino Island. That's about all I can remember. And those decisions were my parents', and it wasn't my deal to question. It was just... And I was an Air Force brat. I never questioned where we landed in the summer, let alone...
you were used to moving all the time.
We were really used to moving, yeah.
So that was just normal to you.
Totally normal.
Yeah.
It was great. So then, as we grew up and had our own careers and families and did those things, I was the one that kept coming back to Lotus. My brother, in all fairness, my brother did a big stint with Lotus in his younger years, and then he got married and had children, and he moved up to Alaska for a while, and all that sort of fell away for him. He never really came back to Lotus after that. He may have just had his way with it, you know. And but I was hook, line, and sinker, always. Maybe more connected to my dad even than the boat, or equal amounts. My dad was always adventure, and I felt secure, but I knew there would always be adventure, you know, whenever I would join up with him.
Yeah.
And so we ended up working on it together in the summers, and then
when you were an adult.
When I was an adult,
yeah.
And I would come up for periods of time, but I had a life in San Francisco, and so. But in the summer, I would go join him, and I would get on a plane. We didn't have cell phones in those days. We had ship-to-shore radio, and I would call on the long-distance line and have an operator patch me through to my dad wherever he was on the Lotus, whether he was in Olympia or Seattle or already up in the islands. Some summers he left without me, and I would meet him further up. And I had such fun. I would sometimes get a ticket on a pontoon plane and land as close to him on an island as I could. And then I would tell him where I was, and I'd find a dock, and he'd come and get me. And another time I rode a bus all the way up Vancouver Island, and I wasn't clear where my dad was on the island by the time I got there, and we talked, and he had moved a couple times, and he said, I'll be on the road up to, what was it, Coquitlam, I think it was, he said, and he said, I'll be on the road, you'll see my flag. And sure enough, he had his folding deck chair and an American flag on a long stick that he stuck into the ground so that it was fluttering in the wind. And he'd bring his Reader's Digest and his lunch, and he'd sit by the side of the road, and the bus would go along, and I'd know that somewhere just north of Coquitlam, that my dad would have found his way to the road. And
that's
I'd
awesome.
get off the bus and there he'd be. And honestly, it was so much fun. And and we fished, and we never did hunting from Lotus, though there is stories told that there was hunting from Lotus, no less.
Yeah.
From the decks. Ooh, I'm sorry, I will make that stop.
That's okay.
Ooh.
Okay.
Eric, hi. I mean, the pilot, it's amazing.
So let's resume here, Christian. So your dad would pick you up by the side of the road. He'd put a flag by the side of the road so you know he was there, and you'd go find him on the boat. And then you would spend several months on the boat?
Well,
or a few weeks?
A few weeks, generally. In those days, I was, I couldn't get away for too very long. And I'd go way up north to find him, and then often when he'd get back down to Victoria for the Wooden Boat Festival and to Port Townsend, which he did every year. He always came back from those adventures in time to do those 2 wooden boat shows. And then I'd come back up again and I'd help him run those shows for those 2 places, and then we'd cruise over from Victoria to do the Port Townsend one. Mm-hmm. So about every other year, we'd have our far north adventures, and on the alternate years, we'd stick around so that he could do the other boat show and obligations. He felt Lotus was a national landmark long before she became a national landmark on the Register of Historic Landmarks for the United States. And he knew that she was special and that she wasn't a copy of anything. She wasn't a replica. She was the real thing. Mm-hmm. And he wanted everyone to see her. Mm-hmm. He was just so pleased, so proud of this boat. And he collected so much history and things like that. So it was real important to him to take her to those shows and open the doors and have people come on board. It was his mission. So we did the Daffodil, and we did the first one of the year was in Olympia. And then there'd be the Tacoma Daffodil and the Seattle Boat Show over the 4th of July.
What's a Tacoma Daffodil?
That's a daffodil.
The daffodil
parade.
Okay.
It'd be a parade of boats, and the boats are open at the dock as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And Tacoma had a boat show down there on that sort of inland waterway that they have in Tacoma. Vancouver had a show at Granville Island. And then along the way, too, there we have cousins. And we'd end back up at Camano Island for a family reunion kind of thing every so often. Yeah. We'd have a week there where the family would get together at my grandma's place, which was up on Camano Island, and look down over Utsalati Bay.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd pull into there, and we'd water ski around Lotus. Actually, she was our water ski station. She was great. It was great.
That's awesome. So on your further north adventures, you went, how far north did you go?
Glacier Bay.
Wow.
Oh, we did that 3 times I went. My dad went twice without me.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What's the cruising speed of this boat, Christian?
About 8.5 knots.
Yeah, okay.
Plenty fast.
Yeah.
It takes a while to get those places at that speed, but it wasn't because we dawdled. My dad rarely would spend more than 1 night in an anchorage.
Oh.
We would want to stay, put in the boats, linger longer.
Yeah.
Loll.
He'd want
My
to
dad
get on
did not know what loll meant. Relax? No, there was no relaxing. He wanted to see what was around the next corner.
Yeah.
There's so much to see up there.
Yeah.
All the islands are beautiful all the way up, and there's fish to catch and crab and, rumors of a great halibut hole. Just
a few
2
miles.
days away or something. We had to get there. And yeah. So
your parents originally bought the boat about 1960, and then they sold it. Tell me about that.
In the 70s, my parents had divorced, and my dad was just doing the boat by himself. He remarried. His wife did not care about Lotus like Curtis did, and she wanted him to go traveling with her, and you can't do that when you have a 92-foot boat. It's hard to leave town. So he decided he would sell the boat, and he did. He sold it to a fellow named Gordon Newell, who was a recognized historian in this area and in this time, really well-known fellow. And he bought the Lotus, and the Fiddlehead Marina in Olympia, pretty much within days of each other. I don't think Gordon had a clue what he was doing. He was a romantic and he had money in his pocket. But an indication of that might be that a few weeks after my dad left on a trip to Mexico with his new bride and his mind free, he got, I sent him the front page of the Olympia newspaper, and Lotus was laying on her side, not unlike she was on February 22nd, in the Fiddlehead Marina, where Gordon had the boat moved to a more desirable slip, which happened to be over the outfall pipe for the city of Olympia, 40-inch pipe. A very low tide, no one took notice of, put Lotus down on top of that 40-inch pipe, and she rolled over on her side, broke 3 frames, and she was flooded for, I'm not sure quite how long it was, I don't remember, 3 days or 3 tides. And the fire department came, and after a number of people tried to get her up off of there, they filled her outside bays in the hull. There's a big center bilge, and then on either side of that, giant, massive stringers that creates these long bays, maybe 60, 80 feet long. Filled those with foam, solid cell foam. There's still foam that we find from time to time.
Really?
Little bits of it, yeah. And that did the trick. And she floated up, and then he did some repairs, and then he called my dad, and he wanted to sell the boat back to my dad, who had gotten the first right of refusal a day after he'd sold Lotus to Gordon Newell. Curtis was so distraught. He really was sad. And he went to Gordon then a day later and said, I at least want you to give me the courtesy of a first opportunity to buy the boat back from you if you change your mind. And so they wrote up an agreement called a first right of refusal. And that's what Gordon used and my dad used to buy the Lotus back.
So how long did Gordon have the boat then before he sold it back to your dad?
Maybe 4 years.
4 years, okay. Mm-hmm. So your dad took it back, and then he sold it again.
Many years later.
How many years
98.
later? Oh, in 98. Mm-hmm. So that was 15 years later or something like that?
Nearly 20.
Nearly 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
in that time period, though, in the late 70s, when my dad got it back from Gordon, my dad was very clear that now his mission was he was going to go to Alaska, and he was going to have these adventures. And, life was he was getting older, and the clock was ticking. Mm-hmm. So he and my brother put that engine in, the Buddha engine that's in there now, and a generator, and an Onan generator, which gave us more grief than I could possibly say. Impellers, 8 impellers, and would stop everything, So, but anyway, that was our ticket to big water and big adventure. No more just kicking around the waterfront of the cities of Puget Sound. We were headed for the Great Northwest.
Yeah, with that big diesel engine.
Yeah. And so then it was absolutely every other year we went north, as far north as we could get before we felt that we needed to come back for the Victoria show.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
So then your dad sold the boat again, and then you bought it. So tell me about that.
So that was in '98, and then it sold twice to a family that ran an inn up in LeConner. And then they found his family's boat, is how I remember it, and he decided that he would sell Lotus because he had an opportunity to buy his family's boat. That man's name I can't recall right now, and his wife. And they did. And they sold it to a father-son, and they took it on, and the father-son loved it. The dad got married on board. The son was working and trying to actually keep up with Lotus, but not knowing very much about really good maintenance. They didn't do it. And then they hired a shipwright who started to do it. And then once he started opening up the boat, they got a little nervous because the boat was being torn apart pretty quickly. And I'm sure he meant well, but it scared those folks so completely that they called me and said they'd actually tried to sell it in the condition it was, and it wouldn't sell. And I didn't have a first right of refusal. Mm-hmm. But they did remember to call me eventually after they even tried to give it away, and no one wanted her. So they called, and I said, well, yeah, I'll take her back.
What year was that?
That was, the deal was they knew I couldn't pay for her. And they said, that's all right, we'll just give her back to you. It'll be better for the boat. And we would like to be done with her.
Yeah.
So I came up. I was down working in San Francisco, and I came up, and I met Brian in Seattle, and we walked the dock out to where she was, and it was pretty pathetic. She was a wreck, and the whole foredeck, everything from the middle of the pilot house forward was virtually gone, and we were worried about her structural integrity and all of that, and the engines weren't running at all. None of the engines were running. The plumbing wasn't working, water wasn't running.
Wow.
Boat was leaking so badly from the roof that was more of a priority than the hull. And the hull has actually been pretty stellar all her life. I mean, I shouldn't say she fixes up really well because she was built so strong to start with. Everything, the plank's 2 3/4 inches thick. Her frames are huge.
Douglas fir,
everything. And in those days it was clear Douglas fir. All these windowsills, when you see them stripped down like they are now, they're clear. Everything's clear. Mm-hmm. And she was very, very, very well built. We have all the plans, so we know what to do and how to do it the way they did it, and we always duplicate the way they did it. We don't try anything newfangled. Someone might make suggestions how we could shortcut this or that, but we've really honored her plan, the plan. Lee and Brinton's plan, the fellows who designed her.
So you got her back in 2004 about?
Yes.
Yeah. And then you set up a foundation for her?
I did.
When did you do that?
Immediately,
You did?
October
Okay.
of 2004.
So tell me about the foundation and how people can help out there if they want to.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, we did make her a Washington State Foundation, nonprofit foundation. We've been working on her 501(c) since just about that same time, but we have not finished it, and a number of people have taken it on, but for whatever reason it's been put back down again and been sitting there, and then someone else will pick it up and work on it a bit. There's renewed energy towards that end. We would like to finish that. Mm-hmm. And get her to be, because there's grant programs and things that, depending on the political climate at the moment, money comes and goes, but you've got to be positioned to be there when the money comes.
Yeah.
And at this point, we're not. And we have sister ships all over the Puget Sound that have gleaned great money from even American Express, not to mention the historic foundations that are umbrella groups above all of us. We would like to be ready for that. Mm-hmm. The foundation at the moment runs a website. The foundation owns Lotus, and we work at raising money for her through our website. There's a membership, and events on Lotus are open only to our membership. That's how we sort of keep it clear that members of this foundation own the foundation. Mm-hmm. And support the foundation, and when you're part of that, you get to be part of the fun. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's the website address?
MV for motor vessel.
Yeah.
Lotus.org.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I've never been very, very good about raising money. I've had to come to admit that recently. I thought I was making it happen, but I haven't been. And so part of my saying that is realizing that I need to reach out to people that can do that. I can do a lot of this other stuff. I'm pretty fearless about the rest of Lotus. The money raising thing I need some help on. So interestingly enough, on this last big event that happened to her, most recent big event, a number of people stepped forward who have terrific IT skills and immediately recognized that I didn't even have a way to make a donation on our website.
Oh.
So now we have a page and instructions and a PayPal button.
Nice.
Which is great. And right away, we got a tremendous number of hits on our PayPal button, and I was thrilled.
Cool.
It boosts everybody's morale, because everyone that works on Lotus is a volunteer. There's no one here that's getting paid.
Wow.
And we have to buy supplies. We've had some things donated. There have been tremendous donations over the years, and I list those on our website. But the labor is all labor of love.
Wow.
Labor
cool.
of Lotus.
Yeah. So tell me what happened over here in February 22nd. You had the boat out moored in Port Hadlock.
We have a mooring there.
Yeah.
We have a 6,000-pound excellent mooring on the bottom, big tripod mooring, that I bought a couple, 3 years ago, and I've been paying on it. It's just about paid off, actually. I think it is paid off. But she was out that mooring, and there was a windstorm the night before, not huge by our standards up here, but it was big enough. The mooring failed. The mooring chain we just found 2 pieces of chain. No reason except 2, both ends of the chain are clean, nothing in the middle. So the only thing, and I mentioned this to a fellow who actually runs a mooring field in Port Hadlock, and he said that one of the chains failed. One of the chains corroded. Links.
Yeah.
I said, that was new chain 2 years ago. Well, it was new. It was chain we bought from a big chain company in Seattle, and I don't remember even how that came to be. I have to find that out, actually. I have to delete this part. But he said, that they'd had it happen at their mooring, and they inspect their moorings all the time, and a chain will corrode, a link will corrode just inexplicably. As Brian says, it was probably made on a Friday, that link. Links made on Monday are really good, and Wednesdays they can be iffy, but on Friday,
it's anybody's.
One foot's out the door at beer 30. And so something happened there, and it went away. So she moved off her mooring sometime in the night and ended up on the beach exactly due east of where she hangs on her mooring, with 300 feet of chain, by the way, at her mooring. And she's been sitting there for 3 years, more than 3 years.
At the mooring.
Yes, and doing just excellent. We've checked that mooring many times. So she ended up on the beach, and I got a phone call at 6 a.m. from a fellow I know there who actually collected our skiff a couple years ago when the wind blew really hard and took my skiff off of the dock. And I picked up the phone and I said, "Oh, Claire, is my dinghy on your beach?" And he said in this wonderful accent, "Well, no, actually, it's your big boat." Well, I'll never forget those words. And so Brian and I hopped up and drove over there and made our way down to the beach. And Lotus was still standing. There was just enough surf to keep her upright.
Oh, really?
And as I was walking down the beach, I said, "It's okay. You're still upright. Good girl." And I no more got those words out than she laid right over slowly on her left side, on her port side.
Really? Right when you got...
Right then. And I burst into tears, and I actually ducked behind a building because it was blowing so hard. And I didn't want anyone to see me crying, so I pulled myself together and got down the beach. And, in a very short order, there were 20 people on the beach, and all of them are people I know. From the island, and the adventurous crew came. I'm not sure if we called some of them or did they just come. Folks from all around, from Hadlock, from the marina, from the boat school. That's who came. And we were just about it. She was over it. People were getting ladders. They were getting tarps. They were getting lumber. We had plenty of lumber in the bilge. We were ready for anything. We always are. But we got more pumps, and for 26 hours, people came and did things. No one showed up just to stuff their hands in their pocket and walk around and observe. No one. They all came with their waders on, with their foulies on. They came with their work tools. They came with a tremendous amount of skill and knowledge about what to do in this situation. And certainly there was direction by Brad, myself, Brian, and Brad Kleinfelder is our shipwright. Brian Toss is my husband. He's a terrific rigger. And me. And then and Susie Kleinfelder, let us not forget, my great friend Susie. But people just needed to be told what to do, not how to do it, just patch that. Put the plywood up on those windows. Go get a pump. We need 2 ladders. The word would go out, and you'd hear coming up the beach, I've got a ladder. I've got a 20-foot ladder. Good. We need another. Well, I think my dad's got a ladder. Somebody would run off and get another ladder. It was just like that. It was really a short, in one way, 26 hours, the way things moved so well. We knew that we couldn't get up the next tide. Now she's hard over. She's got water coming in because there's her whole port side above the guard was needing to be done. Hopefully this October we were going to put that wood on, which has since actually been milled up by a friend of ours who recycles old timber, Jake Jacob. He has a company here in town and works now for a fellow who warehouses all that wood. And he's got it all milled up and ready for us. So we were going to put our savings into that port side and some new paint for this haul out in October. But that was the side that when she did lay over and the tide did come in, huge tides, huge tide put her up. And a huge tide came in the next tide as well. And she was, water was coming in over her windows, and it was pretty rough and pounding quite a bit. And the water coming in on that port side that was all punky. So then we knew we couldn't get her up on the next tide because it was a good foot shorter than the tide that put her up. So we aimed for that third tide. And on the low tide between, which happened between 10 and 1 in the morning, 10 at night, 1 in the morning, we had the tarps all cut and ready. We had 2x2 planks, 2x4 and 2x2 planks to make battens, and we rolled the tarps, and we battened and patched the entire 80 feet of the side of the house on the port side. Just one long patch above the guard. You take a piece of 5-foot tarp these were like 40-foot long tarps, so we could deal with it. And you get a batten in the top part of that 5-foot feet, and you roll it up, and you nail it right under the windows. And then you stretch it down tight, and you put a batten right there where the boat takes a turn to make the guard come out. And then we rolled it down, and we secured it around the guard and underneath. So now we have like all these places where it's anchored. And we did that the whole length of Lotus, and then we took plywood and we boarded up her windows. And the one hole that had been made in that punky port side above the guard, we boarded that up quite well. And we used on the side we could get underneath on the boat, and we could see that there were no holes. There was nothing she was sitting on that was nasty on that side. And on the starboard side, though, because we could get to that side, we used slick seam sealer and a number of other things. I can't remember even now what wall we pulled out to try and fill those gaps where the boards were part on her starboard side, on her hull. Just making little gaps, but we didn't want any trouble on that side. There were 2 rocks. We knew we were going to try and pull her off by the stern, and because the vessel assist people came to talk to me about that, and we saw these. They said, well, we'd like to pull her off by the stern, but these 2 big rocks that were about a little more than knee high, maybe thigh high, no, knee high, but 2 of them and large, they were going to be a problem because they were going to have to rake her over those, and they didn't want to do that. So the adventurous crew had turned up about then. They're dear friends of ours, and we So we've sailed with Adventurous years ago. Brian and I were crew, and we just stay close to those folks. They're the best. And boat school kids came, community came. But it was a small group of very energetic 20-somethings, 30-somethings that called out for, got a sledgehammer? Bigger sledgehammer. Who's got big sledgehammers? And sledgehammers and big crowbars came down, and they bashed those rocks to pieces. Took them right down so that Lotus would pass right over them. It was so much youthful energy, I can't tell you.
Wow,
actually, I think Eric was in on it too. Eric Olson is our engineer, and he was definitely in whaling on those rocks.
Sounds intense.
I'm sure it was relief too, in a way, because there was only just so much you could do for the boat, and we had a short period of time, and everyone needed to be doing something. So these folks took away those rocks.
Yeah. So you got that out of the way?
And got out of the way, and then the tide came in, and we caught some hours of sleep. Scott Wilson and Mandy Wilson, whose parents owned the house right above where Lotus beached herself, they hosted us from the minute we arrived at the beach. They said, "Come in, would you like some coffee? We'll make you some tea." And they fed us, and they gave us a place to sleep. When we could, folks really didn't sleep, but there was about 2 or 3 hours there in the middle of the night where we couldn't do much, and so we slept, and then we all got up to make our date with Destiny, and it was about 5 o'clock, and the towboats showed up. Now everything's taken care of, but they have to pull us off, and I did wonder if they were going to be enough boat. I actually called some other boats, but it didn't work out. So these boats came, and it was Vessel Assist and Captain Jack. And Captain Jack sort of has this big boat called Cascade, and then there was the Negotiator and Gabriel, which was owned by Roger Slade of Vessel Assist. And I could hear them on the scanner because Mandy and Scott had the scanner running in their house. They're geeks. They're both IT people, and they love all that. And they have a boat themselves. And they'd been holed and hung up on a rock in a very scary place in Southeast. So they were completely empathetic to our situation. And I didn't go on the boat. I'm sitting in the house with them. And Scott at one point said to me, because we were standing out on the beach on the little bluff overlooking Lotus, and everything was getting hooked up, and she was lit with halogen lights, and he said, "There's going to be a lot of noise, when she comes up. It's going to sound kind of scary." I said, "Yeah, I suppose it will." He said, "Are you sure you want to watch?" I said, "No, you're right. I don't." And I turned on my heel and I walked back in the house, and I went to the far corner, not far corner, but about 20 feet back into the house in a little room, and I sat down, and I actually sat in lotus position, and I just thought about her, and I could hear everything that was going on because the scanner was on, and I just was doing my own little work with her and the heavens, and trying not to ask for too much, but couldn't we just have this one thing to work out? Because not for me, but because Lotus is so strong and so worthy, and this is so unfair. This boat is, she's 103 years old, and she's not on her last leg. She's incredibly well. We have done such a good job these last, 7 years. Yeah. She's in such good condition. And we've had to prove that over and over again. Surveys, letters, show people, to haul her up, make sure people can see her. This is not a Hulk. She's not a has-been girl.
Right.
She's great. And so there's an amazing piece of sound work on the website right now on the article that Scott wrote for Three Sheets Northwest.
Yeah.
And there's a link right in the middle of our homepage that says click on this, with film and sound.
Oh, nice.
And pictures.
Of pulling it off.
Everything. Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Of what it looked like in the morning when he first got up with his cup of coffee, and there she is laying in the dark on his beach, and
wow.
she's quite the presence. And then the sun came up, and it was a beautiful day, although it was wildly windy and big seas. But anyway, so here we are. And, they pulled from the stern, and it didn't work. They pulled from the side, and it didn't work. And you could hear them say, kind of, and we're running out of time. We've only got a window at the very top of a very steep tide. When you look at the tide chart for that day, it's like looking at your thumb. I mean, the tide went up, and it went right back down again. So we had maybe 20, 30 minutes at the top of the tide. That was it.
Okay.
The next high tide was going to be March 10th.
Oh.
We're February 22nd at this point.
Oh.
And and then they moved all the rigging that Brian made, the rigging slings that he made out of Spectra. And he moved them all to the bollards in the front of the boat, to the big winch that sits here on the front foredeck.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, we rebuilt that deck in 2007. Rebuilt it hugely underneath with a new breast hook and new timbers, and it is hell for stout.
Yeah.
And Brad put in new bulwarks on it, and it's so incredibly strong. And we always thought it was strong, but man, did it prove it that day. And they put the slings on her there and the tow ropes there, and they all pulled on the bow. Now she's in the sand on her bow. She's stuck hard on a granite shield beach on the stern. And buried. Her bow's buried in the sand. But the soundtrack will attest to this, that it's they pulled and pulled, on 3, 1, 2, 3, and their engines would roar. And what'd we get? I didn't feel anything, said someone on the boat, Brian, because he was my spokesman. Okay, 1, 2, 3, because they're not losing any time. Broom. What'd we get? Think we got maybe an inch? Okay, on 3. Vroom again. He goes, what'd we get? I think I know I felt something. Do it again. Again. She's moving. Do it again. She's moving. And everyone is just hooting. And Lotus came right up and off. And in, 30 seconds, she was up and off and floating and moving towards the towboats. And they put her on the hip. And she wasn't even gushing water. The pumps were keeping up just fine. And my friend Susie is on board, and she must have had my number already pre-dialed, because the minute she started to move and everyone started whooping, because I could hear the whooping even over the scanner. I could hear whooping from the boat, and I was standing up, and I picked up my cell phone. It rang, and it's Susie, and she said, "So we're on our way to Port Townsend."
Oh, nice.
Oh, I gotta tell you.
Oh man, that's
God.
an awesome story,
Was
Christian.
so amazing.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
I was dancing and jumping from one foot to the other.
Yeah. So now you've got her in dry dock for some repair.
Yes.
And
for mostly corking. Her hull is fine. There's no damage to her hull at all.
Yeah.
And
just tighten her up and.
Yeah, and this really sweet surprise is, West Marine donated paint to us in 2004. We bought it ourselves in 2007, and we actually asked them for another donation this year to make it an every other year event, so they know that we're pulling our own weight.
Yeah.
There's still bottom paint that we're now scraping off to make for new, but the bottom paint was still on well. That is a really great product. Yeah. West Marine's best bottom paint.
Very cool.
It was great. And so she was well protected all those years, and well protected, well taken care of, well loved, and it's that crew, it's the Lotus crew that has gotten her through all these years and made her ready to face this obstacle, and then came and got her off.
Very cool. Very cool. So we've got your website address, mblotus.org. And so if somebody wanted to contact you, would it be through the website or an email address? Or you want to give us your email address?
Sure. Christian, that's my name.
Yeah.
At briantoss.com. I don't have an MV.
Okay.
Lotus site. Email, it all comes to me. So it's Brian, BRIONTOSS.com.
Okay.
Christian being my name, at Brian Toss.
Okay, very cool. Okay, well, thanks for joining me today. Any parting words for our listeners today, Christian?
Oh, well, do come see the website. Come to see how Lotus looked there's a beautiful article on there by American Bungalow Magazine and lots of photographs and another great story. And you can see some interior shots on the website as well. She's a beautiful, beautiful boat. Come see her in person, of course. Come see us anytime. We'll have a schedule of places we're going to be. And come visit our PayPal button.
Yeah, okay, very good. Well, thanks, Christian.
Thank you so
it.
much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Christian, for doing that interview. It was really fun to come meet you and go on board the boat. And actually, I'd met you before because you're Brian Toss's wife. And when I interviewed Brian, I met you at the shop there, at the rigging shop there in Point Hudson. So thanks again for doing the interview. Folks, if you're listening, please go to the website and check it out, mvlotus.org. There's a place to donate there to the foundation to help this historic boat keep going and doing well. We'd really appreciate it if you did that. Well, thanks for tuning in. We're going to wrap it up now. Please come again next week. We're having an interview with Wayne Chimenti. And Wayne's a tall ship guy and has done a lot of cool stuff over the years. And he's heading up the community boat building program in Port Hadlock now at the Northwest School for Wooden Boat Building. So tune in for that interview next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. And also please connect with me, Dan, at hookedonwoodenboats.com, or Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter at woodenboatdan. If you look me up, I'll be there. Well, I won't be there physically, but you know what I mean. Have a great week, folks. We'll talk again next week. This is Wooden Boat Dan. Keep the sunny side up and the barnacled side down. And have a great week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.